Welcome to A Fine Time, The Nanny Revisited. This is a podcast about The Nanny, where we recap each episode and then discuss, sharing our own unique take on each episode. I'm Bernadette.
And I'm Debbie. Today we're talking about episode 71, That's Midlife. As usual, we'll start with a brief summary of the episode. Maxwell's latest show is a flop, and that triggers a midlife crisis for our favorite Broadway producer. His crisis only worsens when Fran beats him at tennis, so much so that he decides to quit theater entirely and dye his famous gray streak. Fran turns to her mother for advice. Sylvia advises that Fran should marry Maxwell and that she should not have beaten him at anything until after they were married. Their conversation is cut short by Maxwell showing up outside the building with his brand new Porsche. That snazzy sports car garners the attention of Mrs. Feldman's daughter, Mrs. Lieberman's daughter, Mrs. Weintraub's daughter, and Fran decides to rescue Maxwell from their advances, and she helps him see that his life has not amounted to nothing. Despite having monetary resources, his upbringing caused him to be emotionally handicapped, and despite that, he has been very successful. He moved to a new country, set up a successful business, and raised 3 terrific kids. While Fran makes him feel better, but then while he's still feeling a little impulsive, he takes Fran and the new sports car out for one disappointing last hurrah. Bernadette, do you want to add anything?
No, I do not.
All right, would you like to take us to scene 1?
Yes, so we are, I assume at some type of club of like not nightclub, but like a tennis club or something. A nice brunch place. No, wait.
We find out where we are.
We do find we're at a famous like tennis
it's the All-Star Cafe.
Yes, sorry. But Fran is commenting how her neck is killing her. She didn't know tennis matches were so strenuous. And then she starts looking side to side. She goes, Agassi's tush, Sampras tush. And then she repeats that. So she's looking back and forth. And again, Maxwell is there with the kids. And he says something at that point, doesn't he?
So I think one of the kids asks, Fran, you've never been to a tournament before.
Oh, yes. Mm-hmm.
And she says, well, a mahjong.
Yeah, the mahjong tournament. And the only thing that gets the people there moving is the sound of the cellophane coming off of the dish.
The deli platter. And she uses the word tushes because she was going from the Agassiz and Sampras tushes to the tushes at the mahjong tournament.
Yes. And then Brighton mentions you would think you would see, apparently where they are is owned by Monica Seles, Shaq, and Joe Montana. They own the place. You would think that you'd see them. And I believe it's Fran who starts saying oh, you can't expect them to be waiting, the tables or bussing the tables. And then, of course, at that moment, with the timing of the show, hi, I'm Monica Seles.
Right.
The owners at the All-Star Cafe. And we're told that she is a tennis star. She's asking because first of all, she says she's Monica Seles. And then, do you know who she is to Fran? Who am I, an idiot? And then she says she wants to slaw instead of beans. So she's just treating her as like a regular waitress.
Correct.
And we learn that she's won though all of the major tennis things, and Brighton says, except for Wimbledon.
Yeah.
Which causes Monica to kind of give him a look, and he kind of goes, I'll take her beans. And down. And then, I never imagined you would be serving. Serving? That's, I believe, Fran making a pun.
Yeah.
And Monica, though, has kind of had enough of this exchange, and she says that she'll have the waiter come right over. Which is funny because they already have like plates and stuff like half eaten, don't they? Like on their table.
I think they just had glasses and some plates. I don't remember seeing food.
Okay. But anyway, they are.
So Fran says, I've always wanted to learn how to play tennis.
But it's a very big time commitment. and she's always kept her career.
She's been very career oriented.
Yeah. What happened? Says Gracie.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Brighton offers to teach Fran how to play tennis, but Fran has an eye on a young, cute blonde over by the bar to teach her. And Brighton goes, "Am I not cute? Am I not blonde? Shut up, Maggie."
Mm-hmm.
And Fran kind of says, "Okay, if that one doesn't work out, I'm all yours." And so she goes over, and within a second, she turns around and she just tells Brighton, "I'm all yours."
Right.
So we're kind of setting up the tennis aspect of this that will briefly play into the overall episode. Um, but yeah, do you have anything else to add to that opening scene?
I just want to remind our audience that in the episode Canasta Masta, Fran, the family goes to Atlantic City for the tournament, and Maggie's going to go for a tennis lesson, and Fran makes a comment that she doesn't understand tennis, like all that running, etc. And Maggie points out to the cute instructor and says, "That's why." And Fran's like, "Okay, now I get it." So it's sort of weird to me that she's now saying, "I've always wanted to learn to play tennis,"
Yeah.
because she did not always want to learn.
Nope.
All right, so we go into the kitchen, and Maxwell is leafing through papers, and we're seeing portions cut out. And he says to Niles, "Please tell me you cut out the reviews of my new play because they're so good you're having them framed." Niles basically painfully says, "Okay." And Max is like, "Damn it. I was hoping this show was my cat's. Oh, Niles, what is wrong with me? I'm bloody pitiful." And Niles says to him, "With all due respect, sir, there are so many people in this world less fortunate than you. Some are in this very room." "Oh, you mean because you're just a servant? Well, no family, no home of your own. Mm-hmm. No future. Been doing the same thing for the last 25 years that you'll most likely be doing until the day you die." "Right," says Niles. "How are you feeling now, sir?" And Maxwell says, "What's really bothering me?" And Niles snarkily under his breath says, "Carrying around that big fat wallet giving you a hernia." And Maxwell's like, "What'd you say?" He's like, "Tea?" And I think this is the point at which Cece comes in and she says, "Maxwell, did you read Vincent Canby's review? Oh, it was brutal. I just put it on the floor and let Chester give him a little rebuttal." And of course, she comes in with Chester in her arms. And Maxwell says to her, "Cece, you're amazing." "Thank you, Maxwell. Don't you want to know why?" "Why push?" Uh,
Fair.
right. I mean, I don't blame Cece. Like, take a compliment. Fran comes in and sees Chester, and she picks him up, and Chester's clearly happy to see her and licks her face, and she comments, "Oh, gee, Chester, if only you were Jewish with a doghouse in Great Neck." And so we go back to the conversation with Maxwell and Cece, and Maxwell says, "We just put our heart and soul into this new play, and it bombed. Why aren't you upset?" And she has a very good response, "Because Broadway will be dead in 50 years, but I won't." And she whips out a magazine, Cryonic Suspension. "You mean you're going to have your body frozen after you die?" She's like, "Yeah, I'm planning the ultimate revival. Me."
Mm-hmm.
And Niles is like, "No, what? Nobody wanted to see the original. Who'd want to bring it back?"
Mm-hmm.
And Fran, of course, she's still there. So she chimes in that, "I wouldn't want to come back. I mean, it would be so hard to adjust. You'd feel like a freak of nature. You'd have no friends. Your last date would have been 100 years ago." And then she realizes who she's talking to. "You know what? Go for it."
Mm-hmm.
And Cece adds that she's even thinking of having Chester frozen so that they can come back together. Wouldn't that be nice? And at that moment, she tries to take Chester from Fran, and Chester growls at her. Needless to say, Cece's not thrilled with that. And she says, "Come on, you little hairball." Um, and I think they leave. And Maxwell starts thinking out loud that he should freeze himself right now. I mean, here I am, 42 years old, and what have I really achieved? Produced one mediocre play after another. And Fran tries to help him feel better. "Oh, stop feeling sorry for yourself. There's a lot of people much less fortunate than you right here in this room. Look at Niles."
Poor Niles.
Exactly, poor Niles. And so Brighton comes in, and I think Fran has gone to go get her tennis racket. Um, and Brighton explains that he can't go play tennis with Fran because he has to read To Kill a Mockingbird. Fran's come back in and she's like, got 2 words for you, Blockbuster Video. And then she realizes Maxwell's there. And she's like, to enhance the reading experience.
Mhm.
Well, so Brighton had said to Maxwell that Fran's actually pretty good and has taught him a few things. And Maxwell's like, says like what? How to return a serve when you don't have a receipt.
Mhm.
So Niles actually suggests to Maxwell that perhaps he'd like to go out and play tennis with Nanny with Miss Fine. And he's like, Maxwell's like, the last thing I need is a game of beginner's tennis. And Niles says to him quietly, of course, sir. You'd completely destroy and humiliate her, making her feel like a bigger loser than you are. Well, that changes Maxwell's mind. Get my racket. So,
Mhm.
Miss Fine, are you ready to play with me? And she says, you bet. And when we're done, how about a little tennis?
Mhm.
One of those comments we wouldn't understand as children.
Exactly.
Do you have anything you want to add?
Nope.
All right, take us to after the match.
Well, apparently it did not go as expected because flying through the front door are Maxwell and Fran after the match. And Maxwell's, saying the sun was in his eye. Um, Turns out Fran beat him.
She
And
slaughtered him.
yeah, and that's what she says. I slaughtered him 6-4. I creamed that um,
I
British,
creamed
like,
his little English tuchus.
yes, took us, yes. And and of course Maxwell's kind of like stormed off. He's not happy. He's out of the room. So she makes some type of comment about how he looks like she feels when she eats Haagen-Dazs and her spoon hits the cardboard.
Yeah, so she says, I felt so bad for the guy. It was really sad. He had this look on his face like when I'm eating Haagen-Dazs and my spoon hits the cardboard.
Yes. And then Niall says that he can make the soup, a cream of English tuchus.
Mm-hmm.
And in comes angrily Maxwell, handing the tennis racket to Niles, ordering that it be restrung. And then he says, and you can make that soup with your own tuchus because it's soon to be canned.
Mm-hmm.
And I believe it's Fran who says he has
Niles.
Niles, no sense of humor. That's why his comedy flopped.
Yep.
And so this is again where they're like, oh, what's up with him? And Gracie chimes in, oh, you mean daddy's inability to deal with minor setbacks, indicating a larger and deeper emotional problem?
Mm-hmm.
And Fran's like, well, she already said it. Why should I say it again? And they're like, oh, we should get him into therapy. And Maggie's saying, like, oh, we wouldn't be able to get him into that. Um, like, oh, I think they all say, he should be in therapy, but Maggie's worried we wouldn't all have to be there, right? Because I have to like dates and stuff.
Yep.
Um, and then so how do you think you're gonna get him? And then uh Gracie once again chimes in, oh, like under false pretenses by saying that Dr. Bort needs to talk about me, but really it's, a session for him. And once again, Fran points out, well, she already said it. No need for me to say it. She already said it.
Right.
So again, uh, we see Maxwell's emotional response. Everybody's kind of thinking therapy is needed at this time, and it's going to be undertaken by false pretenses.
Yes.
Anything to add to the scene?
The only thing notable is that Maggie's immediate response was like, maybe dad should get some therapy. It really hurts me to see him in pain. And then immediately she realizes what that could mean for her. And that's when
Yeah,
she goes into, we wouldn't all have to go as a family or anything. Right.
yeah.
Um,
Hmm.
so sometimes her heart is in the right place. Not always, but sometimes.
Yep. Okay, can you take us to the therapist office?
So Fran and Maxwell are in the therapist's office alone, and they're clearly waiting. And Fran starts talking about how um, she she always used to think she'd be a good therapist because she's a good listener, and some people don't let others get a word in edgewise. And I'm it's very you need to be a very sensitive person to know when someone else needs to talk. And then she chimes into him. Meanwhile, he's been like, trying to interject periodically, and she just like keeps going and keeps going. She's like, when the doctor comes in, you could chime in once in a while.
Yep.
Well, before the doctor comes in, the receptionist or someone says, "I'm terribly sorry. Dr. Board has been called away, but one of her associates can see you." And Fran's like, "But when will she be back? I don't want some second-rate associate." And who walks in but Dr. Joyce Brothers, who's filling in for Dr. Board. And she's like, "I hope you don't mind." Fran's like, "Oh, who cares about that loser? Was she ever on Hollywood Squares? Oh, Dr. Brothers, I have read every one of your books. The Language of Feeling." And Dr. Brothers says, "That's David Viscott. The 10 Stupid Things Women Do, Laura Schlesinger. You're much taller in person, Dr. Ruth. Well, enough about you. Tick tock, chink ching. Now, the reason I made this appointment for Mr. Sheffield, wait, what? Wait a minute, you brought me here under false pretenses?" And
Mhm.
Fran's like, I told Gracie this was a bad idea. And Maxwell, she clearly didn't.
Yeah,
Um,
no.
Maxwell is not happy. He says that this is ridiculous. I don't need any bloody therapy. And Dr. Brothers says, "Are you Maxwell Sheffield, the Broadway producer?" He's like, "Yes, that's right. Now, if you don't mind, I'm a very busy man. So I'll," and she's just like, "I just loved your new show. I thought the reviews were completely off the mark." And well, he changes his tune. "Well, I suppose I could stay for a little while." And Fran says to Dr. Brothers, "Wow, you are good." And she's like, "For your information, I have written 10 bestsellers." Let it go, Joyce.
Yes.
So, so why are we here? And Maxwell says, "The fact is, there's nothing wrong with me. My last show failed, so I've just been in a little bit of a bad mood lately. That's all." Fran's like, "A bad mood? You've been biting everyone's head off left and right. Watch this." And she turns to him. "I sat on some junior mints on your new suede chair." "You what?" And she's
And he,
like,
like, stands up.
he does stand up. And Fran's like, "Can you believe what I have to live with?" And he tries to justify his reaction. He's like, "Do you know what your problem is? You don't know what it feels like to fail at something you've put so much effort into." And she's like, and she stands up at this point. "Oh yeah? Well, you know that new suede chair with the junior mint stain? I tried to color in the rest with brown magic marker. Huge failure. Happy?" And Maxwell's like, "Look, I don't know why everyone wants to make such a big deal about this. I have to come to terms with the fact that I'm 42 years old, and despite having every opportunity money can buy, my life has amounted to zip." And he walks out.
Mhm.
And Dr. Brothers says to Fran, he's just going through a little midlife crisis. It's very common among men his age. And Fran's like, "Oh, I've read about that. Next thing you know, he'll be trying to prove his virility in the arms of the next gorgeous young thing to cross his path." And she like starts pushing Joyce Brothers out of the way. "Out of my way, Joyce!" And she
Yep,
runs after him.
'cause she
Um,
wants to be that young
of course she does. Um, so yeah, is there anything you want to add to that?
No, I do not.
All right. Would you like to continue then?
Yes. So we're now in the kitchen, and Fran is reading a book called New Passages, and she's telling Niles about it. Oh, this is so interesting. There's different eras. Oh, look, women in their 30s who lie about their age. Oh, look, here's me in the 20s. Again, one of those like comments where she's not being very insightful to herself.
Hmm.
Um, and then she asks Niles about um oh, because Niles says like, oh, it's probably a midlife crisis, and she asks him like, how did he handle his midlife crisis now when he was in his 40s? Which Niles is very offended.
Do you blame him?
Yes. And Cece walks in, and she of course, I think she like I have in my notes crack the champagne.
Yes. So didn't Niles make a snarky comment about killing someone?
Yes. Yes.
Um so Cece comes in and she says, "You two are not going to believe this. I got a message on my answering machine."
Oh yeah, 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 yeah. And Niall sarcastically, of course, was like, "Oh, let's crack the champagne. I'm so happy for you, dear."
Yes.
And then she's like, "Is that Mrs. Doubtfire?" And she goes on to say, it was for Maxwell. Maxwell's quitting theater. And and again, she's very concerned because what is she supposed to do if he quits, right?
Mm-hmm.
And they Niles and Fran are like, you were born rich. You could go with your friends, hang out with them, and then come back and lick this spoon. That's Niles.
Yep,
'Cause I think he's like, isn't he icing a cake or something?
he is.
And anyway, Fran's trying to reassure him, probably pass. My when my parents went through that phase, when her dad, they tried swinging, and then the others, what happened? The other swingers saw them, so apparently that
Mm-hmm.
didn't really go anywhere.
Mm-hmm.
And they're concerned because in he walks down the stairs, and he is once again trying that quote unquote youthful look. Like he's tried this before.
Yes, he did. Yes, he has.
And it's like jeans with like a white shirt, right?
I think
um
it's a black shirt.
Sorry, black shirt. And
Tight fitting.
yes, very tight fitting, and he's saying to Maggie, oh come on Maggie, let's
Mags. He calls her
oh,
Mags.
oh yeah, let's cruise by Tower, or sorry, go to Tower Records, cruise the bin.
Bins.
And Maggie like turns to Fran, and she's so desperate. Help me so much.
Mm-hmm.
And so Fran says to Mr. Sheffield, oh, I caught Maggie smoking and drinking. And he kind of snaps out of this like trying to be hip persona. He's like, Margaret, you're grounded for 3 weeks. And uh Maggie turns back to Fran and she's like, oh, thank you. And oh well, she says that to him. Oh, thank you, Dad. And then she turns back to Fran, and Fran's like, okay, that should give enough time for this to blow over. But if not, I'll next thing I'll tell him is that you're pregnant. And like
Mm-hmm.
Maggie seems all right with this
Yes, she does.
um and Cece, Maggie leaves. Cece to Maxwell starts saying, I know this isn't about me or anything like that, but why are you doing this to me?
Mm-hmm.
And of course, Maxwell's just kind of over it. And Cece can just go back to what she was doing before. And Niles points out, well, there's not really a need for Civil War nurses these days.
Correct.
And again, they point out, Cece, you're being so selfish. And trying to decipher, died.
Yeah, so
Oh, that's when Fran realizes that, Mr. Sheffield, you dyed your gray streak? What is wrong with you? And she's like, that's my gray streak. I gave it to you and I can take it away. I'm the one who can take it away. So yes, this is the turning point for Fran is,
mm-hmm.
is the gray streak being dyed. Um, and anyway, uh, a little hard to decipher my notes from here.
So I just want to circle back to the gray streak and then I'll help you out.
Okay.
So she asked him what the hell's wrong with you, and he says, I happen to like it. I think it takes 10 years off.
Ah, yes.
Catch you later, babe. And he walks out, and that's when she shouts to him, that was my gray streak. I caused it. It was mine to remove.
Yes.
And so then she says to Niles, I'll tell you, it is so pathetic seeing someone trying so desperately to
yes.
recapture their youth by dyeing their hair and wearing skin tight clothes. Oh, I shouldn't be so hard on him. I mean, who knows? Maybe the same thing could happen to me.
Yep. Yep. Exactly. Thank you.
Mhm. Yeah, you're welcome. So we then go to the Fine family home, and Fran walks into the kitchen where her mom is, and she says, Ma, you're on a diet. And so he's like, you can tell already. And Fran says, yeah, actually, your can gave it away. And she gestures to the can of diet
Like
powder.
huge.
Yeah.
Huge. And it like
Sylvia,
seems like Slim Fast with like part of it taken off, like the name.
yeah. So Sylvia, who has her back to Fran, says, oh, thank you. And like squeezes her own tuchus. Um, And then she offers her daughter to try the diet shake she's made. And so Fran does. What is this? And Sylvia explains, you just add powder and some non-fat milk and some ice cream. Fran looks at the can. Ice cubes, Ma. And Sylvia's like, no, the ice cream gives you a little body. And Fran's like, no, it doesn't.
Yep.
And so then she brings up the reason she's there. Ma, I need some advice. Mr. Sheffield is going through a midlife crisis, and I don't know how to pull him out of it. So Sylvia has now sat down at the table with Fran. Marry him. How would that help? Who cares? Better we should be happy. And then she, makes a comparison to what Morty went through in the 70s and ends up taking out the, shall we say, Afro type haircut. Uh,
Mhm.
and, you know, it's a Mod Squad toupee. And Fran wants to know why she still has it. And Sylvia explains it's not abrasive on Teflon.
Mhm.
And then, Fran asks her mother, but why is he going through a midlife crisis anyway? I mean, just because he's over 40 and his play's a flop and I beat him at tennis? What? Have I taught you nothing? You never beat a man at anything until after you're married. And Fran's like, is that how daddy won that pie eating contest on your first date? And Sylvia's like, it wasn't easy. It was chocolate cream. And Fran's like, oh, the things you do for love, Ma. And then we hear, honking and Maxwell shouting from the street below, Miss Fine, Miss Fine. And so the two of them go to the window at the back of the kitchen. Look at what he did. He bought himself a Porsche. Now, what does he think that's going to get him? And Sylvia starts pointing, Mrs. Feldman's daughter, Mrs. Lieberman's daughter, Mrs. Weintraub's daughter. And Fran's like, hey, 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 Ma, lower the fire escape. I'm going in.
Mhm.
She needs to go and rescue Maxwell from the women accumulating around him.
Yes.
Do you have
So
anything you want
we
to add, or
no.
would you like? Okay, continue.
Yeah. So like so then we cut down to street level where Maxwell is with his new Porsche, and there are indeed a lot of women around him, including Dottie, who comes up and kind of is trying to hit on him, and there's obviously a guy off screen. She's like, "Quiet down, Vito," and that turns out to be her fiance. But if you like me, I'll ditch him or something like
I'll
that.
dump him.
Yeah. Um, and then another lady comes up with some like plugs and like jumping cables, like, hey, if anybody's gonna jump or sorry, she asks if he needs a jump, like if he broke down and needs a jump. And
Right.
this is when Fran comes down the fire escape and she's like, hey, if anybody's gonna jump him, it's going to be me. Dottie, you're engaged. All the ladies scatter. And she kind of says, it's like you haven't seen a single gorgeous millionaire before. And suddenly she gets hit in the head.
Mm-hmm.
Sylvia, like they couldn't hear you in Jersey. And anyway, so they start kind of walking down the street to like a place because like apparently she's gonna get grapes while they're having this conversation.
Yeah, to me that sort of felt like unnecessary, but
Yeah.
maybe
They're
they were trying to
walking a
highlight.
little bit down this block to get some grapes.
Well, so they walk away because um keep in mind, so she says to Maxwell, you're the most successful person I know. And he's like, I wasn't brought up like you to find a husband, get married. And she says, well, finding a husband isn't all I want. And then she gets hit on the head again with something else frozen. And that's when she says, can we keep moving? She's got a frozen lasagna that can take us both out.
Yes. Yes. Um, that was that was later on in my notes because
Oh,
first
sorry.
she's trying to ask him what he's trying to prove, you know, um, even Andrew Lloyd Webber, like Andrew Lloyd Webber's brought up again, but they can't really think of his failure. But that's when she says, "You're the most successful person I know," and he like dismisses that by saying he has such a privileged upbringing, and like you said, the husband and getting married. So she's hitting the head once again because she wants to move because of the frozen lasagna. And Maxwell goes on to say, he was sent to the best schools. And Fran counters that, yeah, but you were sent off when you were 6 years old. Where were your parents when you lost your first tooth? In a safari in South Africa. But they like sent king. I'm not sure what that word was. Congruent?
Krugerrand?
Yeah.
I don't
To
know.
my head bastard to put underneath my pillow. And then Fran asks him, well, when did you ever get to run into your mother and father's bedroom, at night because it was storming out? And he's like, well, I tried it once, but by the time I got there, it was, over. It was a very big house.
Mm-hmm.
And so Fran points out um, that, unlike him, she grew up in a very close and loving family. And then she makes the comment, am I bleeding? And she's
Yep.
touching her head where she got hit. And Maxwell kind of looks at it and says, I think it's raspberry filling. And as he like is no longer paying attention, she dabs at it, puts it on her tongue, and then to herself nods, yeah, it's raspberry filling. um, so again, they are still talking about, like, Fran's pointing out, like, if she were kind of he, he could have just spent a life going to nightclubs and jet setting, but instead he went to work. He came to a country. He has three terrific kids who that he raised without anyone else. Wait a minute,
Mm-hmm.
kind of discounting herself there. And and then again, she, have said that he was emotionally, like, handicapped.
So,
Or he
so
said that, "Yes, I suppose I was emotionally handicapped." Like, he started a thing, and she goes, "Yeah, completely dysfunctional." Um, do you wanna clarify that before I move on?
yeah, so she says that, a lot of people with your kind of money would have just sat back and nightclubbed with the jet setters. That's what I would have done. But you went to work, mister. And he's like, yeah, you're right. I came to this country all by myself, started a very successful business out of nothing. And then she adds, plus you raised three terrific kids, absolutely without any help from anyone. Oh, wait a minute. And he's
Yeah.
like, it's true. It's true. I haven't done that badly considering I'm bloody handicapped emotionally. And she's
Yeah,
like,
and
please, you're completely dysfunctional. Feel better?
yes, a lot better, and then they hug. Um, and then he kind of pulls back, and he's like, "Well, still in a little bit of an impulsive mood. Shall we have one last hurrah?" Oh, Mr. Sheffield.
Mm-hmm. And we all think it's going to be something that it isn't.
Mhm.
So we cut to them in his tiny little sports car, and he's like, "Isn't this thrilling, Miss Fine? What a machine! Can't you feel it vibrating?" And her response is, "Yeah, but who can enjoy it?" Again, a comment we wouldn't understand as children.
Mhm.
And he says, "I'm not used to driving on the side of the road, so let me know if I start drifting over, okay?" And she's like, "Drifting over, drifting over." And he's like, "All right, let's really gun it, huh?" And like they're shaking and they're moving, and he's saying, "Oh God, oh God," and she's like, "Wait, wait," and then they stop. Oi, I just had a flashback to my old boyfriend.
Mhm.
Again, a comment we wouldn't understand as children.
Yep, because there's the whole big metaphor of that scene.
Uh huh. And the fact that it is only a metaphor is disappointing to the audience. I'm
But
just
yeah,
saying.
that's the episode.
Exactly.
Do you have any overarching comments before we get into shticks?
No, I think I'm good. How about you?
Yeah, I'm good too. So, favorite fashion. I feel like this wasn't as fashion heavy as the previous episode was in terms of statement pieces.
No.
I will say I have a feeling you probably like it, and I'm not a fan. That green outfit
Yep.
at the first scene.
Yep. I love it.
It's like a lime green
Mm-hmm.
outfit.
It's a great color. Looks great on everyone, clearly. She
I
pulls
mean,
it off.
yeah, was there like fashion you really wanted to talk about?
I mean, that was actually the one note I wrote for myself.
Yeah.
Um, the other, I guess, sort of notable is like when Fran went to play tennis with Maxwell, she's wearing like white
Oh,
shorts and like a
yeah.
white crop top. And then I think she also wears like a big, fuzzy, fluffy white coat.
Mhm.
Um, and then, I mean, you mentioned Maxwell's attire when he's trying to be younger.
Mm-hmm.
Um, yeah.
And that dyed gray streak.
Uh-huh. It takes 10 years off.
Mm-hmm.
Not really. I mean, he still looks 40, but whatever. He does look younger without the gray streak.
Yes. But less distinguished as well.
Correct. Although, as we learned, with age, men look more distinguished and then they get a 20-year-old bimbo,
Yep,
quote
that was
Fran.
from a previous.
So,
Mm-hmm.
exactly. It's sort of interesting. I mean, I guess this is a larger picture point, but it's sort of interesting that we go from a couple weeks ago talking about aging in that context to Maxwell having a midlife crisis.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So,
Okay. So, notable New Yorkers then?
Andre Agassi and
Mm-hmm.
Pete Sampras are both mentioned in the first scene. They're both American tennis players, as is Monica Seles, who's a
Mm-hmm.
retired Yugoslavian tennis player.
Oh.
I think her last championship was won for the United States, but I'm not a tennis fan, so I didn't follow very closely.
Yeah. Shaq.
Other Shaq, an American basketball player, one of the greatest basketball players of all time. I thought his height was notable, 7 foot and 1 inches.
Yep.
That's according to our friends at Wikipedia.
Joe Montana.
An American quarterback from our friends at Wikipedia.
Now, is the All Star Cafe a real place or
Yes, it
just?
is.
Okay.
The All Star Cafes, plural, are sports themed restaurants that feature stadium cuisine. They were developed by Planet Hollywood and they involve the aforementioned athletes as well as Wayne Gretzky. That's according to our friends at Wikipedia.
Interesting. Wimbledon.
The oldest and most prestigious tennis tournament in the world, according to our friends at Wikipedia.
Yeah. Backing up, there was a reference to Mahjong again.
We'll talk about that in our Yiddish Cup.
Okay. Okay. Um, and then cats. we can't go many episodes without any kind of reference to Andrew Lloyd Webber and cat.
Correct. Correct.
Because again, he was hoping that this show would be his cats.
And he was woefully mistaken.
Yes. Um, Vincent Canby.
Oh, that's one I missed. I'm not gonna lie.
Oh, well, he is like a real critic because
Oh,
that's his because that's the one that Cece references, that his review from the New York Times.
yes.
He is an actual critic. So
He was apparently he passed away, and according to our friends at Wikipedia, he passed away in the year 2000.
mhm. um like, okay, did you consider the whole like subject of cryonic suspension to be a
I
topic or
I
no?
did not, but
Okay.
um, we could
Would you?
talk about that if you'd like.
No, it's okay. We can we can go past that. To Kill a Mockingbird.
Famous novel by Harper Lee.
Yes. Blockbuster Video.
I had that in 90s nostalgia, but yes, a now defunct video rental store.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I think there's one remaining.
Hmm.
I think. Um, I could be wrong.
Yeah. Haagen-Dazs.
Ice cream.
Yes,
Oh,
that's come up before, I think, probably, right?
yes. Okay, so sorry, I found an article back to Blockbuster Video from an article published May 3rd, 2022. This is the headline: "The world's last Blockbuster is still operating in Oregon, and you can visit."
Nice. Okay.
So, just wanted to point that out there. I had not totally made it up. They still operate out of Bend, Oregon, which is 160 miles away from Portland. It is south. Um, I just wanted to mention that. I did not make it up.
Nice. Okay. Dr. Joyce Brothers.
So she is a real person. She's an American psychologist, advice columnist, TV personality, and writer who is considered a pioneer of pop psychology, and she made psychological concepts mainstream. That's according to our friends at Wikipedia.
Hollywood Squares.
That is a television show in which celebrities sit in a tic-tac-toe type field and they answer questions.
Mm-hmm. Then we got several in a row references to specific like books and
Yes, we
other
did.
psychologists. So the language of feeling.
So it's a book by David Biscott, which, and I quote, argues that a clear understanding and free expression of one's feelings provide release from self-limiting defenses and emotional binds and access to fuller experience and satisfaction. That's according to our friends at Goodreads.
Hmm. The 10 Stupid Things Women Do.
So the full title is 10 Stupid Things Women Do to Mess Up Their Lives, and it's by Lauren Schlesinger. And it is a book that, and I quote from our friends also at Goodreads, uses real world examples from Schlesinger's radio show and private practice to drive the message home that don't blame anybody or anything but yourself if you are unhappy and your life seems a mess.
Okay.
Yeah,
Dr.
go ahead.
It's a Dr. Ruth.
Oh, so German American sex therapist, author, talk show host, professor, Holocaust survivor, and former Haganah sniper. That's according to our friends at Wikipedia.
I don't know if you put Junior Mints.
I did.
Okay.
So Junior Mints, and I quote, America's favorite chocolate-covered creamy mint since its introduction in 1949. So that's the end of the quote. It was named after a then popular Broadway show named Junior Miss and is now part of the Tootsie family. That happened in 1993. Over 15 million are produced daily in Cambridge, Massachusetts.
Wow. Are you a chocolate mint person or not?
I am.
I am not.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry for you.
Magic marker. Don't know if you included
I
that.
did. So
Oh.
according to our friends at Crayola.com, Sidney Rosenthal invented a felt tip marker in 1952, and he named it a magic marker because it can mark on almost every surface.
New passages.
That one I admittedly missed.
Okay. Because I like saw, I think the first name was Carl.
So according to our friends at Goodreads, I believe it's by Gail Sheehy.
Oh,
No,
oh, maybe.
because this is a book that came out in 1996.
Okay. What's it about?
Oh, sorry, it was first published in 1995, but then Ballantine Books published it May 28th, 1996. So it is a landmark bestseller. Oh, so this is the sequel to to Gail Sheehy's landmark bestseller Passages, and she here wrote a sequel, but instead she discovered and I quote, a historic revolution in the adult life cycle based on the fact that we are living significantly longer.
Gotcha.
New Passages, and I quote, tells us we have the ability to customize our own life cycle. This groundbreaking work is certain to awaken and permanently alter the way we think about ourselves. End quote.
Okay. Mrs. Doubtfire.
It's a movie starring Robin Williams about a man who wants access to his kids, and he dresses up like a woman to be their nanny.
Mm-hmm. An elderly woman.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. Tower Records. I don't
So
know if you.
we talked about them previously. They were a record store in New York City. They still exist. We talked about them ages ago in I think the kissing contest episode.
Yep. There's a reference to Civil War. Civil War.
So that would be the war between the North and the South when the South tried to secede and etc. Actually, yeah, never mind. I totally forgot what I was going to say. Hate it when that happens. Go ahead.
Okay. Then, like I said, when Sylvia's like doing the powder, to me it kind of looks like a big Slim Fast like tub.
It looked like that to me as well, but I couldn't clearly make out Slim
Yeah,
Fast.
it's
So
almost like they partially covered it so that it was not specifically that brand, like just kind of a reference to it is my feeling. But yeah.
you missed Porsches. The Porsche.
Yes.
It's a fancy sports car. Very expensive.
Mm-hmm. And then let's see here. Andrew Lloyd Webber, just by name.
Yeah. I think there's So back to the listing of books, Fran makes the comment, "You're much taller in person." And then Dr. Joyce Brothers says, "That's Dr. Ruth." I can't find that as an actual title.
Oh no, I think that was a reference not to a book, but to her actual physical stature.
Okay, I thought it was a reference to a book because Dr. Joyce Brothers says that's Dr. Ruth.
Yeah, I think she's probably saying that people typically say that too.
Oh, okay, because Dr. Ruth was only 4'7".
Hmm.
Okay, never mind.
Yeah, I just took it to mean that that's typically what you say to Dr. Ruth.
Okay,
Yeah.
then I'm out.
Okay. Yeah, I don't, I'm trying to see. I don't really see anything else.
So Yiddish account.
Yes.
All right, so we're gonna start with the names Feldman, Lieberman, and Weintraub. Those are all common Jewish last names. Feldman originates from Western Ukraine, and it is an artificial extension of Feld. That's according to our friends at Ancestry.com. Lieberman is another common Jewish last name. It means dear or beloved. That's from our friends at Wikipedia. And Weintraub is another Jewish German surname, which means wine grape. And that's from our friends at Wikipedia as well. So I mentioned we talk about mahjong. We talked about it before in our Yiddishakov segment before, but it's been a while. So from our friends at Jewish Telegraphic Agency, they have a whole article about how mahjong became Jewish. And so the question is, how did a game that began on ancient Chinese tables come to grace contemporary Jewish tables? And they say, quote, and I quote, "While books, documentary films, and traveling museum exhibits have puzzled over mahjong becoming such a Jewish craze, no one has reached a definitive answer. Could it be connected to the formation of the National Mahjong League by a group of Jewish women in 1937, or to its popularity among Jewish wives during World War II while their men were away, or the game's prominence at Jewish bungalow colonies in the mid-20th century? Or else, as NMJL President Ruth Unger believes, that selling mahjong cards functioned as a fundraising source for synagogue sisterhoods and Hadassah chapters." And I end quote. Basically, we don't know, but it's tied to it has remained a fixture in the Jewish world since the 1920s. So
Interesting.
yeah, I thought so. And then the last Yiddishakop thing I have is, as Fran and Maxwell were walking on the street, like I can't remember if it was before or after Fran bought the grapes, we see a little bit of the diversity in Queens, and they're passed by two Hasidic men. They're so Hasidic men, you could tell that they were Hasidic men based on their distinctive garments. They were in the black suits and hats with the payas, the hair on the sides. So the garments that they wear are reminiscent of 18th century Polish suits that the nobility wore when Hasidic Judaism began. And I'm going to quote from our friends at Seeker.com. "The traditional dress of Hasidic Jews is very recognizable. Men wear large brimmed hats with long black coats. They usually have thick beards and wear long curls at the side of each face, at each side of their face." So I just wanted to point that out, that I thought that was nice that we saw some diversity of Queens.
Hmm. And I would just add tuchus.
Oh yes, tuchus, which we talked about a few weeks ago.
Yeah.
Means butt,
Yes. As
in
it's
case anyone forgot.
used so often. Yeah. In the nanny. So are we ready then for 90s nostalgia?
Uh, I think so.
Okay. So there's a lot, I feel like. Um,
Mhm.
Again, the idea of going to Tower Records and just like strolling the cruising,
Cruising the bins.
yeah, in the bins, like I feel like that's not so much a thing anymore with the advent
Agreed.
of digital music.
Agreed.
Um, I feel like every time you go to like a Target or anything like that, like the music section's smaller.
Mhm.
But yeah. Do you want to add one?
Fran's suggestion that Brighton go to Blockbuster Video.
Yep, indeed. Uh, Although like the idea of watching a movie, I'm sure is still used with people with like the classics that have like a movie.
Hmm.
Um, Now, did you notice the very large old computer in the therapist
I
office?
did. I
Yep,
did. Old
yep,
cars.
indeed. There were. Um, like maybe there's not as many as I was thinking.
Yeah, I was kind of like, I wonder what else she's going to talk about because I don't
Yeah,
know.
no, I think maybe there's not as many. Um, Although I don't think Hollywood Squares is still a thing, right?
Oh, I don't know. Maybe.
I don't know. Maybe it's been revived. Like
I'm.
Cece. I think too, probably, this is just a guess, the whole cryogenic, whatever thing was probably,
Cryonic
yeah, cryonic
reservation.
was probably bigger then.
So there is the Cryonics Institute,
Yeah.
apparently. So they still exist.
Would you ever do it?
No.
Me either.
Yeah. Um, yeah, there actually have been some articles written about it as recently as 2021. So I guess it's still a thing.
Hmm.
Um, I do want to mention, circling back to our notable New Yorkers, the woman who plays Dottie, we have seen her before. She's played by Dee Dee Rescher. She was in the first episode of The Nanny. She was Dottie, and she was the one in the bridal salon trying on the wedding gown, who Fran was getting saltine crackers for, and tells her, "Oh, you look just like a virgin." Um,
Okay.
just wanted to mention that Fran had to get her the saltines for her morning sickness.
Mm,
Um, I just wanted to mention that.
yeah. Okay.
So future fun.
Yes.
All right. So kind of ties into what I was just saying. Dee Dee Rusher will be back. She will be in the episode Samson He Denied Her as the bailiff. That's the episode where Fran and Cece get selected to sit on the same jury. She will also be back at the reunion show as one of Fran and Val's classmates who did not really like them in high school. And finally, she will be in the episode titled Maggie's Wedding as a bridal shop clerk.
Oh,
So
interesting.
that's one. Two, to your point about Hollywood Squares, Maxwell later gets to be a guest on Hollywood Squares, filling in for the missing Andrew Lloyd Webber. And unfortunately, they do not update the bio. So they read Andrew Lloyd Webber's bio instead
Oh.
of Maxwell's. Yeah.
Mm.
But don't worry, Maxwell has bigger and more important things to worry about at that point. So let's see. So you know how Fran tells Maggie that, if he's not over this in 3 weeks, well, I'll tell him you're pregnant.
Yeah.
In season 6, Maggie has a pregnancy scare, but it turns out she's not the one who's pregnant.
Ooh.
And then finally, Dr. Joyce Brothers will return to the nanny. The next time she visits, she actually comes to the Sheffield home to judge who would be a better wife for Maxwell, Fran or Cece. And that's in exchange for Cece getting Maxwell to consider the script for her musical, Nuts.
Okay.
So a lot to look forward to, a lot of fun in the future.
Hmm. Okay. Before we get to episode ratings,
Mm-hmm.
or we can do it after.
Your choice.
I was going to talk in general, like what your thoughts were on Sylvia's advice to Fran about never beat them at anything before you're married.
I was going to ask, is it about never beat a man before you're
Yeah,
married,
that should
or
probably go
to
with nostalgia too. Seems outdated.
um I mean, that might explain why I'm not married, because I refuse to cater to gender stereotypes like that. I
Yeah.
don't know. Maybe I should have taken Sylvia's advice. Who knows? I'd be a very
No.
different person if I did.
Yeah.
What do you think of it? Besides that it's outdated.
It's outdated. And I would say if you don't want to be with a guy who's that who's like that, I don't think.
But could you imagine, like, it's like a bait and switch, right?
Hmm.
Like, I'm gonna act a certain way until you put the two rings on my finger, and then you're stuck with me, and now I'm gonna show you my true colors. That
Yeah.
doesn't seem like
I,
a good situation for
no,
anyone.
doesn't seem like a great start. Like a great
No,
foundation.
no, no, no. Um, what about her advice that Fran should marry Maxwell?
I mean, we all want that to happen, but in terms of like it happening in that specific moment,
But do you think that would help his midlife crisis?
if he got married,
Yeah,
I don't know. I don't know. Maybe because she's younger.
she's younger, and it would be a
Not as
fresh
young as she
start.
claims, but still younger.
True.
But I think honestly, he shouldn't rely on someone else in that respect. I think the best way to get through it was to acknowledge what he's done, if that makes
Hmm.
sense.
So basically, he needs to help himself. He can't rely on someone else to solve his problem.
Exactly.
Although I will say, counterpoint, Fran has said to him, you're a grown man. If you want someone to solve your problems, get a wife. So
Mhm.
just saying, like, I'm a nanny.
Mhm.
Um, you're like, I don't approve of that advice, which is fine. You're probably right. That's fine. That's fine. I just like to quote the nanny at any opportunity I get.
Yeah.
So yeah. So episode ratings.
Yeah. Then this week you get to go first.
So as a friendly reminder, we like to rate each episode from 1 to 5 lipsticks, with 1 being the least, the worst, and 5 being the best. I'm giving this a 5. I love this episode. Well, I shouldn't say I like this episode a lot. I'll put it that way. I think it's great. Maxwell sort of goes through a very understandable, moment of like it is crisis, right? Like he really thought the show was going to be his cats. It was going to be his shining accomplishment, and it wasn't. And it knocks him down multiple pegs, and he has to figure out how to move forward. Oh, I should have thrown this in future fun. He will have a show that does win him Tony Awards. It's called The Widower. We'll talk about it. Uh,
Oh,
I
I
think
guess
in season
I
4.
wonder what that's about.
Who knows? Who knows? Um, but it actually garners him a lot of attention, and actually ends up with him and Fran being in a tabloid. So, but yeah, no, I like this. It seems like such a like humanizing moment for him. Yeah, he could have handled it better. He could have not taken his appointment with his himself out on others. He could have gone to therapy on his own, not under false pretenses. He could have done so many things, but like it's just so relatable that like people stop and look at where they are in their life and think, I should be further, I should be better. And that's just something people need to work through, I guess. And I like that Fran is there for him. I like that um, Fran pretty much saves him from himself. I like it. So I'm giving it a 5. How about you?
So, um, I realized one other thing that I wanted to point out was when Niles was trying to convince Maxwell to like play tennis with Fran by using you can completely destroy and humiliate her.
Mm-hmm.
Did not like that.
That's fair.
In retrospect, I probably should have given last week a 4.5.
Well, you
Um,
can change it at the end of the season.
yes, because we always reserve that right.
Exactly. We make the rules. It's fun.
So for me, I'm going to give this episode a 4. Just again pointing out some of the interactions and motivations. I agree with you. It's totally understandable to have that feeling that you're not in your where you expected to be in life, where you
Mm-hmm.
may feel like you've fallen short of like what you were wanting. But again, like that comment about destroying and humiliating Fran by playing tennis. Like, that's not great.
I mean,
Um,
you're right, but just to play the devil's advocate, like it's sort of a stupid suggestion on Niall's part, right? Like Fran knows she's a beginner tennis player. So like if she lost to a more experienced tennis player, I don't think it would completely destroy and humiliate her. I
I know,
think
but
she'd
that
just be
being
like,
the motivation for him to
say
change
yes.
his mind, yeah,
No, that's fair.
that's where I'm kind of like, um, also uh, I am glad that, um, I'm glad that he acknowledges his privilege.
Hmm.
Um, I understand where Fran's coming from in terms of the emotional piece of it, but also I think it's also a bit overboard to totally dismiss the privilege aspect of
Hmm.
it. I don't know. Um, yeah, like I said, I didn't hate the episode or anything. It's just that some of the stuff knocked it down a bit for me. So
No, I get that. You're right. Like compared to last week, do I like this episode as much? No. Do I like this as much as some of the other episodes? No, but it is one that I will watch again and again.
yeah.
Um,
So yeah.
none of them is perfect, I guess is the bottom line.
Hmm.
So, but none of us is perfect either. So
That's
it's
true.
all fine.
Fine. This is a
Ex-
fine time.
exactly. Exactly. Is there anything else you want to talk about?
No, I think that's it.
All right. Well, that's all we have for you today. We hope you had a fine time with us as we revisited The Nanny. Join us next week when we'll be discussing episode 72, The Cantor Show.
If you'd like to reach us on social media, you can find us on Twitter at Nanny Revisited. You can also send us email at findtimenannyrevisited@gmail.com. Have a great week.